The rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the corner office on the 47th floor. Daniel Whitmore stood with his hands clasped behind his back, surveying the Manhattan skyline like a general overlooking his conquered territory. At 38, he'd built an investment empire that made him one of the youngest billionaires in the country. Every building he could see from this vantage point represented money, opportunity, power. And power was everything. His phone buzzed for the 15th time that hour, another missed call from his daughter, Sophie. She was 10 now, though he'd have to think hard to remember her exact birthday. March something. His assistant handled those details, sent the gifts, arranged the cards he never actually signed. He glanced at the screen and swiped the notification away. Whatever she wanted could wait. He had a merger to close, one that would add another $200 million to his portfolio. "Mr. Whitmore, the Tokyo investors are on line 3. His assistant, Jennifer's voice crackled through the intercom. She'd been with him for 6 years, loyal and efficient, though he couldn't recall if she had family, hobbies, or any life outside this office. He didn't need to know. He paid her exceptionally well to be available 24/7, and that's what mattered. "Tell them I'll call back in 20 minutes, Daniel said, not turning from the window. "I want them anxious. Anxious people make mistakes." He heard the click of the intercom going silent and smiled. This was the game he'd mastered. Every interaction was a negotiation, every relationship a transaction. His father had taught him that before the old man died, leaving Daniel a modest construction company and a simple piece of advice. "Money is the only thing that never betrays you, son. People will let you down, but a dollar is always a dollar." Daniel had taken that lesson to heart. He'd transformed his father's small company into a real estate empire, then diversified into tech investments, hedge funds, and private equity. He'd made his first million by 25, his first 10 million by 30, and crossed the billion-dollar threshold at 35. Each milestone had been marked not by celebration, but by the immediate pursuit of the next goal. There was always more to acquire, more to control, more to own. His ex-wife Laura had called him obsessed. That was 3 years ago, right before she'd taken Sophie and moved to Connecticut, citing emotional abandonment in the divorce papers. Emotional abandonment, as if emotions paid for Sophie's private school, her music lessons, her riding instructor, as if emotions maintained the trust fund that would ensure she never wanted for anything. He'd given them everything money could buy, and somehow that hadn't been enough. The door to his office opened without a knock. Only one person had that privilege. Marcus Chen, his best friend from college and now his chief financial officer, walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. Marcus was one of the few people Daniel genuinely respected, perhaps because Marcus had nearly as much money as he did, and therefore couldn't be bought or impressed. "You're avoiding your daughter's calls again," Marcus said, handing him a cup. It was exactly how Daniel liked it, black with 1 sugar. Marcus paid attention to details. "I'm working," Daniel replied, taking the coffee. "Some of us still care about growing this company." "The company is worth $3.2 billion, Marcus said, settling into one of the leather chairs. "How much growth is enough?" "There's no such thing as enough, you know that." Daniel finally turned from the window and walked to his desk. The surface was immaculate, everything in its place. He liked order, control, predictability. The moment you think you have enough is the moment someone hungrier takes it from you. Marcus studied him over the rim of his coffee cup. They'd been friends for 17 years, roommates at Wharton, partners in their first business venture. Marcus was at Daniel's wedding, had held baby Sophie in the hospital. "When's the last time you saw her? Sophie, I mean." "I see her every other weekend," Daniel said, though even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. The custody agreement said every other weekend, but he usually sent his driver to pick her up and deliver her to whatever event she wanted to attend, then retrieve her later. He told himself she was happier that way, doing what she wanted rather than sitting in his apartment watching him work. "When's the last time you actually spent time with her?" Marcus pressed. "Talked to her, did something together." Daniel felt a flash of irritation. "I provide for her. She has everything she could possibly want. Laura moved to Connecticut specifically to buy that ridiculous house with the stables. Sophie has horses, for God's sake. Horses! Do you know how much it costs to maintain horses? I'm sure you could tell me down to the penny, but that's not what I asked." Before Daniel could respond, his phone rang. The Tokyo investors.
He held up a finger to Marcus and answered, switching immediately to deal mode. The conversation lasted 40 minutes, conducted in the aggressive shorthand of high-stakes finance. He negotiated, pushed, maneuvered, and finally closed the deal with terms favorable enough to add another substantial sum to the company's value. When he hung up, he felt the familiar rush of victory. Marcus was still sitting there, now scrolling through his own phone. "I got a call from Laura this morning," he said without looking up. Daniel stiffened. "Why would she call you?" "Because you won't answer her calls either. She wanted me to tell you that Sophie has a piano recital on Friday night. She's been practicing for 3 months. She specifically wants you there." "Friday night I have dinner with the Singapore delegation. It's been scheduled for weeks." "Reschedule it." "It's a $50 million deal, Marcus. You don't reschedule $50 million deals for a school recital." Marcus finally looked up, and his expression was unreadable. "No, I guess you don't. Just like you didn't reschedule the Beijing trip for her 9th birthday, or the London meetings for her school play, or the Dubai conference when she had pneumonia and was in the hospital." "She had Laura with her," Daniel said defensively, "and I sent flowers, and I called." "You called once, for 5 minutes, while she was sleeping." The words hung between them like an accusation. Daniel felt his jaw tighten. "What exactly are you trying to say, Marcus?" His friend stood up, setting his empty coffee cup on the desk with deliberate care. "I'm saying that your daughter called you 15 times today. I'm saying that she's 10 years old, and she can probably count on one hand the number of real conversations she's had with her father this year. I'm saying that you're so busy acquiring power that you don't see what you're losing." "I'm not losing anything," Daniel said coldly. "I'm building something. I'm creating a legacy." "For who?" Marcus asked. "Who's this legacy for if you don't have anyone to share it with?" "I have Sophie. She'll inherit everything. She'll never have to struggle, never have to worry about money. I'm giving her freedom." Marcus walked to the door and paused with his hand on the handle. "You're giving her everything except what she actually wants. You ever think about that?" He left without waiting for an answer. Daniel stood alone in his office, surrounded by the trappings of his success: the custom furniture, the original artwork, the view that cost more per month than most people earned in a year. His phone sat on the desk, showing 17 missed calls now, 15 from Sophie, 2 from Laura. He picked it up, his thumb hovering over Sophie's name, then set it down again. He'd call her later, after the evening conference call with London. He'd explain about the Singapore delegation, about how important his work was. She was smart, she'd understand, and if she didn't understand now, she would when she was older, when she realized everything he'd built for her. The rain continued to fall against the windows, and Daniel returned to his computer screen. There were emails to answer, deals to structure, money to move. This was what he knew. This was what he did, and he was very, very good at it. The city lights began to flicker on below as evening approached, and Daniel Whitmore continued working, alone in his tower, surrounded by everything he'd gained, and blind to what he was losing.
Friday night arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind of evening that made New York feel almost friendly. Daniel sat in the back of his Mercedes, being driven to the restaurant where the Singapore delegation waited. His phone had been mercifully quiet all day. No calls from Sophie, no messages from Laura. He told himself this was good, that they'd finally accepted his priorities, his responsibilities. The driver pulled up to the restaurant, an exclusive establishment where reservations were made months in advance, and the prix-fixe menu started at $400 per person. Daniel gathered his briefcase and stepped out onto the sidewalk, and that's when he saw them. Across the street, a small crowd was entering a brownstone building. He recognized the banner hanging above the door: Riverside Music Academy. Sophie's school. The recital. He checked his watch. 7 o'clock. It was starting right now. "Sir?" his driver prompted. The restaurant door was open, the maitre d' waiting expectantly. Daniel stood frozen on the sidewalk, his eyes fixed on the brownstone. Through the lit windows he could see people taking their seats: parents with cameras, grandparents with flowers, families arriving together. And somewhere in that building, Sophie was probably backstage, nervous, checking the audience for a father who wasn't coming.
"Sir, the delegation is waiting," the driver said again. Daniel thought about the $50 million deal. He thought about his reputation, his word, his power. You didn't cancel on important investors. You didn't show weakness. His father would have walked into that restaurant without a second thought. But his father had also died alone in a hospital room, surrounded by lawyers and financial advisors instead of family. Daniel had been in Tokyo closing a deal. He'd made it back for the funeral, but not for the goodbye. "Change of plans," Daniel heard himself say. "Take me to Riverside Music Academy." The driver looked surprised, but nodded and pulled back into traffic. Daniel called Marcus as the car navigated the short distance. "Please tell me you're not calling from dinner with Singapore," Marcus answered. "I'm going to Sophie's recital," and speaking the words out loud made them real. "I need you to handle the Singapore delegation. Take them to dinner, show them the Brooklyn project site, whatever you need to do. Keep them happy until Monday." There was a pause. "Are you serious right now?" "Completely serious. Can you do it?" "Of course I can do it," Marcus said, and Daniel could hear the smile in his voice. "But Daniel, those investors flew in specifically to meet with you. This could damage the deal." "Then it damages the deal," Daniel said, surprised by his own conviction. "Some things are more important. Look at you having an epiphany. Laura's going to faint when she sees you walk in. Don't make a big thing out of this, Marcus." "I'm not making it a big thing. You are. Finally." Marcus hung up, still sounding pleased. The car stopped in front of the brownstone. Through the windows, Daniel could see the auditorium was full, every seat taken. Parents stood along the back wall, cameras ready. He was late, probably embarrassingly late. The recital had already started. He paid the driver and walked to the entrance with less confidence than he'd felt in years. In boardrooms, he was fearsome. In negotiations, he was unshakable. But walking into his daughter's school recital, he felt like an imposter. The lobby was empty, everyone already inside. He could hear piano music, delicate and precise, a young student, maybe 7 or 8, working through a classical piece. He opened the auditorium door as quietly as possible and slipped inside. The room was warm and packed with people. He stood at the back, scanning the program someone had left on a chair. Sophie Whitmore was listed near the end, performing Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the same piece his mother used to play when Daniel was young, before she'd passed away when he was 12. He wondered if Sophie had chosen it, or if it was a coincidence. Laura sat in the 3rd row, her attention fixed on the stage. She looked different from the last time she'd seen her, which he realized with some shame had been at the divorce hearing 8 months ago. Her hair was shorter, and she seemed more relaxed somehow, as if the stress of being married to him had been physically weighing her down. Daniel watched as student after student performed. Some were polished and confident, others nervous and halting. Parents applauded enthusiastically regardless of the performance quality, their pride obvious and unconditional. He tried to remember the last time he'd felt that kind of uncomplicated pride in something Sophie had done. Surely he had, when she was younger, but the memories felt distant, obscured by years of prioritizing everything else. And now, performing Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, please welcome Sophie Whitmore. Daniel's breath caught as his daughter walked onto the stage. She'd grown since he'd last really looked at her. She was taller, her hair longer, pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a dark blue dress he didn't recognize. She'd probably picked it out with Laura. He didn't even know what size clothes she wore anymore. Sophie sat at the piano and adjusted the bench with the careful precision of someone who'd been taught proper form. She placed her hands on the keys and paused, taking a deep breath. Then she looked out at the audience, scanning the seats. Even from the back of the room, Daniel could see the moment Sophie's eyes found the empty seat beside Laura. Her expression flickered with something that looked like disappointment before she controlled it, her face settling into professional neutrality. She was learning to hide her emotions. She was learning to expect nothing from him. The realization hit Daniel like a physical blow. His daughter had learned not to expect her father to show up. Sophie began to play, and the first notes of the nocturne filled the auditorium. She was good, really good. Her fingers moved across the keys with confidence, drawing out the melody's melancholy beauty. Daniel found himself transfixed, not just by the music, but by the concentration on her face, the way she swayed slightly with the rhythm, the obvious passion she brought to the performance. This was his daughter. This talented, serious, beautiful person was his daughter, and he barely knew her. The piece built to its emotional peak, Sophie's hands moving faster now, the notes cascading like water. Someone coughed in the audience, but she didn't falter. She was lost in the music, in her own world, a world Daniel had no part in. As the final notes faded, the auditorium erupted in applause. Sophie stood and bowed, a small smile finally breaking through her serious expression. She looked at Laura, who was beaming, and Daniel saw his daughter's smile widen. Then Sophie's eyes drifted to the empty seat beside her mother, and the smile dimmed again. Daniel didn't think, he just moved, pushing his way through the standing crowd towards the front of the auditorium. People looked at him in surprise as he passed, this man in an expensive suit forcing his way through families. Sophie was walking off the stage when she saw him. She stopped mid-step, her face cycling through confusion, shock, and something that might have been hope before settling into cautious wariness. Laura followed her daughter's gaze, and her expression hardened when she saw Daniel. "Sophie," Daniel said, when he reached them, "that was incredible. The Nocturne, that's Chopin's best work, and you played it beautifully." Her daughter stared at him. "You came?" "I'm sorry I was late, but I heard you play. You were amazing." Sophie's eyes were shining, but she blinked rapidly, fighting tears. "You never come to anything." The words were simple and devastating. "I know," Daniel said, his voice rough. "I know I haven't been there, but I'm here now." "For how long?" Sophie asked, and the question held more weight than a 10-year-old should have to carry. "How long until you have to leave for work?" Daniel opened his mouth to say something about being there as long as she wanted, but Laura cut him off. "Sophie, why don't you go see Mrs. Chen backstage? She wanted to talk to you about your performance." Sophie looked between her parents, then nodded and walked away, her shoulders tight. Daniel watched her go, feeling like he'd been given a gift, and immediately dropped it. "What are you doing here, Daniel?" Laura asked, her voice quiet but sharp. "I chose this instead," he said. "You chose this? Once? Out of how many times? Do you have any idea how many times she's looked for you in the audience? How many times she's asked me if you're coming, and I've had to watch her face fall when I tell her probably not?" Laura's voice was shaking now. "Do you know what she said to me last week? She said, 'It's okay that Dad doesn't come to things. He's important. He has important work to do.' She's 10 years old, Daniel, and she's already making excuses for you." Each word felt like a knife. Daniel had faced hostile takeovers, aggressive competitors, ruthless investors. None of it had prepared him for this. "I'm trying," he said weakly. "Trying? You're trying? Trying is showing up even when it's inconvenient. Trying is making her a priority. Trying is being her father, not her ATM." Laura took a breath, composing herself. "The recital is over. You saw her play. You can go back to being important now." "I don't want to go," Daniel said, and was surprised to find he meant it. "Can I take her to dinner? Both of you, I mean? Just dinner." Laura studied his face, clearly trying to determine if this was genuine.
They went to a small Italian restaurant 3 blocks from the school, the kind of place with red checkered tablecloths and Sinatra playing softly in the background. It was nothing like the restaurants Daniel usually frequented, with their minimalist decor and molecular gastronomy. This place had probably been here for 50 years, family-owned, unchanged. He liked it immediately. Sophie was quiet during the walk, staying close to Laura. Daniel tried to make conversation, asking about school, about her other classes, about her friends. She answered in monosyllables, polite but distant.
He was a stranger to her, he realized. He'd become a stranger to his own daughter. The restaurant was crowded, but they managed to get a table in the corner. Sophie sat next to her mother, across from Daniel, her hands folded in her lap. She looked so grown up in her recital dress, but also achingly young. When had she stopped being a little girl? When had he stopped noticing? "So," Daniel said after they'd ordered, scrambling for conversation topics, "how long have you been playing piano?" Sophie glanced at Laura before answering. 4 years, since I was 6. 4 years. 4 years of lessons, practice, progress, and he'd just heard her play for the first time tonight. "You're very talented. That nocturne is a difficult piece." "Mrs. Chen said I needed a challenge," Sophie said, a hint of pride creeping into her voice. "She said I was ready for advanced repertoire." "Your grandmother used to play that piece," Daniel said, and Sophie looked up, interested for the first time. "My mother. She played piano every evening after dinner. That was her favorite Chopin nocturne." "I didn't know that," Sophie said softly. "I don't really know anything about Grandma. She died before I was born." "She would have loved to hear you play," and his throat felt tight. "She would have been so proud." They were quiet for a moment, the silence less strained than before. Then Sophie asked, "What was she like?" For the next hour, over pasta and garlic bread, Daniel found himself telling stories he hadn't thought about in years. He told Sophie about his mother's love of music, about how she'd insisted he take piano lessons even though he had no talent for it. He told her about his mother's garden, about the way she knew the name of every flower, every bird that visited. He told her about the way his mother had made him feel special, important, loved. "She sounds amazing," Sophie said, and there was a wistfulness in her voice that made Daniel's heart ache. "She was," I agreed. "She died when I was 12. Cancer. It was fast, and then she was gone." That must have been really hard, and her eyes were so full of compassion, so much like his mother's had been, that Daniel had to look away. "It was," Daniel said. "My father didn't really know how to handle it. He just worked more, built his business. I think that's how he dealt with grief, by staying busy." "Is that what you do?" Sophie asked, and the question was innocent but devastating. "Stay busy so you don't have to feel sad?" Laura's hand moved to cover Sophie's, a gentle warning, but Daniel shook his head. "It's okay. It's a fair question." He looked at his daughter, really looked at her. "I think maybe I do. I think maybe I've been so focused on building things, on accumulating success, that I forgot what I was building it for." "Dad," Sophie said, and it was the first time she'd called him that all evening. "Why don't you ever come see me?" The question hung in the air. Laura started to intervene, but Daniel held up a hand. This was his to answer. "I don't have a good excuse. I could tell you I'm busy, which is true. I could tell you my work is important, which is also true. But the real truth is that I was scared." "Scared of what?" Sophie asked, confused. "Scared that I didn't know how to be a good father. Scared that I'd mess up, say the wrong thing, disappoint you. Your mother and I didn't work out, and I think part of me blamed myself for that. And then I kept finding reasons to stay away. Work was easier. I knew how to do that. I knew how to close deals and make money. But being a dad, I didn't have a manual for that." Sophie was quiet, processing. Then she said, "You know what's scarier than you messing up?" "What?" "You not being there at all." Her voice was small but clear. "I'd rather have you mess up than not have you at all." Daniel felt something break inside him, some wall he'd been maintaining for years. "I'm so sorry, Sophie. I'm sorry I haven't been there. I'm sorry I made you feel like you weren't important. You're the most important thing in my life, and I've done a terrible job of showing you that." Tears were streaming down Sophie's face now, and Laura was blinking rapidly, fighting her own tears. "Do you mean that?" Sophie asked, "or are you just saying it?" "I mean it," Daniel said, and he reached across the table, offering his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Sophie took it. "I mean it, and I'm going to prove it to you. I know I can't fix everything right away. I know I can't make up for all the times I wasn't there.
but I want to try, if you'll let me." Sophie nodded, crying harder now, and Laura got up and moved to Sophie's side of the booth, wrapping her arms around her. Daniel felt like an outsider looking in on something beautiful and broken and fragile. He'd caused this pain, he'd created this distance, but maybe, just maybe, he could start to repair it. They sat there for a long time, letting the tears come, letting the words settle. The restaurant moved around them, other diners coming and going, but their little corner was a world unto itself. A father and daughter, separated by years of neglect and absence, trying to find their way back to each other. When Sophie finally looked up, her face blotchy and tear-streaked, she said, "Will you come to my next recital? It's in 2 months. I'm playing Debussy." "I'll be there," Daniel promised. "Front row." "What if you have work?" "Then work will have to wait. You're more important." Sophie studied him, clearly trying to decide if she could trust this promise. "Okay," she said finally, "but if you don't come, I'm going to be really mad." "If I don't come, you have permission to be as mad as you want, but I'll be there, I promise." After dinner, Daniel walked them to Laura's car. The night was cool now, the streets quieter. Sophie walked ahead, still processing everything that had been said. Laura hung back with Daniel. "Thank you for letting me do this," Daniel said. Laura looked at him, her expression complex. "I did it for her. I didn't do it for you. She needs her father, Daniel. She's always needed her father." "I know. I've been an idiot." "Yes, you have. But showing up tonight was a start. Just make sure it's not the end, too. She can't take being disappointed by you again. It'll break her." "It won't be the end," Daniel said. "I'm going to do better. I know you have no reason to believe me, but I am." "We'll see," Laura said, but her voice was softer. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you came tonight. I saw her face when she spotted you. You made her happy. You should do that more often." They reached the car, and Sophie got in the back seat. Before Laura could follow, Daniel called out, "Sophie!" His daughter rolled down the window. "Yeah? Would you want to have dinner next week? Just us. We could go wherever you want." Sophie's face lit up. "Really?" "Really. You pick the place, I'll be there." "Can we go to that burger place I like, with the good milkshakes?" Daniel had no idea what burger place she was talking about, but he said, "Absolutely. Text me the address." After they drove away, Daniel stood on the sidewalk for a long time. His phone had been buzzing all evening about the Singapore deal, about investors, about opportunities and crises that all seemed to require his immediate attention. He pulled it out and looked at the notifications. 43 messages, all of them about money, power, success. He thought about Marcus's question, who's this legacy for? He always assumed he was building something for Sophie, securing her future, giving her freedom. But what good was financial security if she grew up without a father? What good was a trust fund if it came at the cost of a relationship? Daniel had spent his adult life believing that money was power, that accumulation was achievement, that success was measured in dollars. His father had taught him that money never betrays you. But tonight, holding his daughter's hand across a table in a modest Italian restaurant, he'd felt more powerful than he ever had closing a billion-dollar deal. He'd felt needed, he'd felt loved, and he'd realized that this connection was the real power. Everything else was just noise. He called Marcus as he walked back to where he'd left his car. "How'd it go?" Marcus answered immediately. "It went. She played beautifully. We had dinner. We talked. Really talked. And you were right. I've been losing the most important thing while chasing things that don't matter." Heavy realization for one night. "Yeah, well, it's been building for a while. I just didn't want to see it." Daniel reached his car and leaned against it, looking up at the sky. You couldn't see many stars in the city, too much light pollution. "How did the Singapore deal go?" "They were annoyed at first, but I sold them on the Brooklyn project. We'll probably still get the deal, though maybe with slightly less favorable terms. They want to meet Monday to finalize." "What if I can't make Monday?" Daniel asked. There was a pause. "What do you mean you can't make Monday?" I mean, what if Sophie needs something Monday? What if she has a school event or wants to have dinner or just needs her dad? What if I prioritized that instead? Then I guess I'd be talking to an alien, because this doesn't sound like the Daniel Whitmore I know. Maybe that's a good thing, Daniel said quietly. Maybe the Daniel Whitmore I know needs to change.
Monday morning, Daniel sat in his office staring at his calendar. It was color-coded and meticulously maintained, every hour accounted for. Meetings with investors, conference calls with international partners, strategy sessions, acquisition discussions. It was the calendar of a man who treated time like the precious commodity it was, who never wasted a moment, who filled every hour with productive activity. It was also the calendar of a man who had no space for his daughter. He called Jennifer in. "I need you to make some changes to my schedule." She appeared with her tablet, ready to make adjustments. "What are we moving?" "Everything," Daniel said, and she looked up in surprise. "I need you to block out every Tuesday and Thursday evening, 5 to 9, non-negotiable, no meetings, no calls, nothing." "Every Tuesday and Thursday? That's going to conflict with—" "I don't care what it conflicts with. Those times are for Sophie, and I need every other Saturday blocked out too, the whole day." Jennifer stared at him. "Mr. Whitmore, that's going to significantly reduce your availability. The Tokyo investors prefer Thursday evening calls, and Saturday is when you usually—" "The Tokyo will have to work around it, and whatever I usually do on Saturday, I'll do some other time. Can you make it happen or not?" "I can make it happen," she said slowly, "but people are going to notice. There will be questions." "Let them question. I'm making my daughter a priority, and if that bothers people, they can find someone else to do business with." He paused. "And Jennifer, I need you to add something else. I need an alert for every school event Sophie has, every recital, every play, every parent-teacher conference, everything." Jennifer was quiet for a moment, then smiled. "I'll take care of it. For what it's worth, I think that's wonderful." "Do you have kids, Jennifer?" Daniel realized he'd never asked. "2, a boy and a girl, 9 and 12. And I've probably made you miss a lot of their events, haven't I? Working late, weekend calls." She hesitated. "It's part of the job." "No, it's not, or it shouldn't be." Daniel thought for a moment. "Restructure your schedule, too. I want you gone by 5 every day, unless there's a genuine emergency, and no more weekend work except in crisis situations." "Mr. Whitmore, I don't think—" "I'm serious. You should be gone with your kids. I'll hire an evening assistant if I need one, but you need to have a life outside this office. We all do." After she left, Daniel spent the morning reworking his approach to the business. For years, he'd operated on the assumption that success required total commitment, that every hour had to be spent building, acquiring, growing. But what if that wasn't true? What if you could be successful and still have time for the people who mattered? Marcus knocked and entered without waiting for permission. "I heard you're giving up Saturdays." "Every other Saturday," Daniel corrected, "and yes." "The Singapore delegation is confused. They think you're losing interest in the deal." "Then explain that I'm not losing interest. I'm just not available 24/7 anymore. If that's a deal breaker for them, we'll find other investors." Marcus sat down, studying him. "You're really doing this? You're actually changing your entire life?" "I'm trying to. I've spent 17 years building an empire. I've made billions of dollars. I've closed deals that made headlines, and none of it matters as much as the look on my daughter's face when I showed up at her recital. You know, people are going to think you're soft. In this world, showing that you care about anything besides the deal is seen as weakness. Then I guess I'm weak. I can live with that." That Thursday evening, Daniel picked up Sophie from school himself.